Hello there. I'm joined by Quality Autism Noah today to talk about some really, really obscure German kind of EU books that tell some very interesting stories. So we're going to be asking Noah some questions about those stories today and kind of learning about these. How are you, Noah?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm fine. I'm happy I have the chance to talk about these.
Yeah, they're super interesting. I remember first seeing them when you were making Reddit posts about them in like 2019, 2020. And I was like so confused and baffled by what they were. I was like, what in the world are these? And then what really blew my mind is when you actually showed me that they really are minis. Like it just blew my mind.
Yeah, let me show it off how many they are.
It's still so crazy.
Yeah.
What's the print like in them? Is it super small?
I
Is it like
can
magnifying
show you.
glass small?
I think it's readable.
Man, that's crazy.
Yeah, insane.
So they're absolutely, literally minis. And how would you pronounce the beginning of that? Is it Heine?
Heine.
Minis?
Heine.
Heine. So it's
Heine,
like an E at the end. Okay.
Yep.
Interesting. And is that does that mean something in German?
And no,
And is
it
that-
doesn't. It's just the name. It's
It's
the
just
name of
the name.
the publisher.
Okay, the publisher. Gotcha.
Mhm.
And here's one of my first questions: is how much did Heine have the rights to do this, if at all?
Well, Heine was the official publisher in that time. I
Okay.
mean, we had a bunch of different publishers for Star Wars. It's not like in America where you just have like Bantam and Del Rey, obviously, and different for YA stuff. In Germany, it's all over the place. Still is. All these different publishing houses. So when you buy German Star Wars books, they all have different formats and stuff.
And sizes and stuff.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
that's annoying for a collector, obviously. But Heine in the 90s and I think early 2000s, they had the rights, published the Bantam era. And last thing they did was like 2014, they released most of the Bantam era as ebooks, which was nice.
Okay.
Because we didn't had them before, you know.
Yeah.
And these books, this series, I think Heyne-Mini was like something they had going on. I don't think this was specifically created just for these Star Wars books. Because
It was
I swear,
a sub house of their publishing brand. Like they were starting it up like the pocket books for like
something like that, where
yeah.
it's like Heine, it's just like, oh, normal, like this isn't it, but like just normal paperbacks and hardcovers or whatever. And this was just some, what would you call it? Some little thing they did,
Like
for
a
like
side
different
publishing.
with different franchises maybe that they had the rights to.
Yeah, gotcha.
Yeah, but so yeah, and I mean they had this rights for Star Wars, so they had the rights, to publish stuff.
And these are mostly retellings of the films, correct?
For the most part, which I can get more into when I talk about the actual like content. But so let me just say we have 4 books. First 2, Han Solo and Chewbacca, and then Luke and Leia. Easy enough. The first one with Han and Chewie was disappointing because that is mostly just the films retold with dialogue and everything. But all
Pictures
of those
too, right?
Oh
Pictures
yeah,
in them too,
everyone has
yeah.
like little black and white pictures in them, which is surprising.
Stills from the movies mostly, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
which is surprising and weirdly high quality because Heine nowadays they don't publish, like they don't insert any kind of like artwork or anything in the books.
Yeah.
But yeah, so mostly they do recap the movies, which is why I think those were like targeted as like a younger audience. I think like 12-year-olds. Special books like cheaper, small, for, literally pocket books, more so than what you imagine it, like your American ones, because those literally fit in a pocket.
Yeah, we have a whole line of pocketbooks that were like a sub-publishing house of, I think it was Simon and Schuster. It was like a sub-publishing house, and they were called pocketbooks, but they were only slightly smaller than mass-market paperbacks. So I was thinking it was going to be something like that, but these are literally pocketbooks.
Yep. I mean,
Yeah.
you can see it fits in my hand.
It's just so crazy.
Yeah. And you would think for something this small, they wouldn't have a lot of like content, especially since, like I said, they also recap the movies a lot.
Yeah.
But this one, they're all about the same size, like 125 pages, this one, for example.
Yeah.
But there is interesting stuff in here, which I can get into.
Yeah.
Unless you have some more questions. Like, let me just say right away, the author is a guy called Oliver Denke. And
Right.
apparently he was like the head of like the German Star Wars and Star Trek fan clubs
Okay.
around that
Yeah.
time.
Interesting.
Which I don't know much about, but I Google searched him to find this out, and apparently he's an extra in the Phantom Menace, which
Okay, that's
is nuts to me.
wow.
Yeah, there's like only one picture I could find of the guy, and it's him in like a Naboo, like outfit, sitting on the stairs of the set.
Wow, who was like one of the guards on Naboo, or like one of the dignitaries.
Not of the guards, like royalty. That's what his outfit looked like, at least. Like
the robes and stuff like that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's the only image of him on the internet. His extra role in Phantom Menace.
Yep.
Wow.
Insane.
I mean, that's a cool opportunity for him, I guess. And I bet he was thrilled with the opportunity to write these minis for Star Wars. Like, if you're a fan and you have the chance to do this, you're not going to complain about, did Lucasfilm ask me to write this? You're going to write those stories, get it out.
And I mean, that leads into the question, how legitimate is this?
Yeah.
Because, so essentially what this is the publisher saying, hey, we're going to make these mini books for like children, most likely.
Yeah.
Because like I said, because of the format and everything. And it's essentially similar to the Essential Chronology from the 90s, where it's like, okay, we split this into 4 separate topics. Han and Chewie, Luke and Leia, the Jedi, and the Empire. And we're just going to collect all the information we have, especially with the movies, because that's the big thing, but also the expanded universe gets a little recap in those. But obviously also some new content, which we're going to talk about.
Yeah. So the 4th one is called Das Imperium, right? And what does Das mean? The Empire?
The Empire.
The Empire? Okay. And then Die Jedi Ritter, is that the Jedi Order?
Die Jedi Ritter means the Jedi Knights.
Okay, the Jedi Knights. And then I think Han Solo and Chewbacca is spelled UND, correct?
Exactly, UND.
Yeah.
And then Luke and Leia just has like the symbol for it, so that's easier.
Yes, and where can you get these? I think you can get them on like eBay UK websites, eBay Europe websites. I've seen them pop up from time to time.
Oh yeah, that was great, because when I found out about them and I wanted to get them, I just went on like the regular German eBay, and I was like typing it in, looking it up, very cheap. I paid like 15 euros in total for all 4 of them.
So they're not that valuable in terms of currency at present, at least. At least somewhat.
The Empire one was a little bit more expensive, not crazy, but a bit more, because I think the rest of these was like 2 euros.
Okay.
So very cheap.
Yeah. So they're at least to an extent still in circulation.
I would say so, yeah.
Yeah. And what you started talking about there kind of was bringing me into another question, is how did you discover these, and when was that?
Okay, I discovered them, I think, late 2019, early 2020, I think, going off memory. And what happened was, on my Discord, I was talking with some of my old followers who are not there anymore, German-speaking guys. And I think we talked about the Hungarian Han Solo novels and like the
Right.
Spanish Ewok comics, which is also like
Yeah.
ambiguous canon, where it's like the
Yeah.
publisher going, I mean, we can do this, I swear. And one guy pointed out to me on a German fan website for the EU that lists like books and stuff. Randomly, he just found a listing for the Heyne-Minis. And that website claimed the books take place in the Legacy era, which obviously we were interested in, but none of us had read it. So I looked it up. I couldn't find any information. It just said, and they were kind of like chronologies, retelling the history of Star Wars and the expanded universe up until 1997. That's when they came out. And obviously, so I bought them because I was intrigued. Let me think. That's pretty much it, I would say.
Yeah.
That's how I found them, because the website really just didn't have any more informations. It just said like they were probably not canon. That was on the website. It's probably not canon, as it's pretty fan fiction-y in, the content.
So after the first time I heard about these, Christopher Nelson mentioned it in a live stream, and he said that's what Noah's always talking about. So then I went to your Reddit post and was looking at that. But then I found it on another Star Wars fan website. I'm not sure if it's the same one, but I'm going to share my screen for a second so that you can see this. It's called StarWarsReadingOrder.com. And to me, it gets some things wrong about like the order, the chronological order, but it's a good resource because it has a lot of the material gathered together. So I've referred to it before. It does pretty decently in the Clone Wars multimedia project, like balancing that with TCW. But here's the website. And scrolling down through the Legacy era, well, it would be before it because they listed it before the Legacy comics, I believe. So let me go down here and change it back a page. Can you see that?
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay, so if you scroll down here, here's Fate of the Jedi, right?
Mm-hmm.
And here's where they appear. Right after this. Right here. They've got them all up here. Listed as books and listed at 104 ABY.
That is not accurate. Crucible, I don't know where they got this date from, but
and then they put it here. They've got the author there, Oliver Denker, and they're listing it as published by Broskiert. Do you know where they got that?
I can't read what exactly it says. Can you zoom in, bro? Oh, no. That's not a publisher. Broschiert means it's the type of book that it is. Okay. I don't know what the English word is, but that's just a mistake. I guess they copied this from somewhere else and just didn't speak German.
Possibly, probably. So I was very confused by seeing this because when I was reading your chronology, you have it where it's supposed to be, and they just pulled 104 ABY from nowhere, it seems.
Yeah. I guess they went like exactly 100 years after, Return of the Jedi.
Return of the Jedi, yeah. I was surprised that they put that there, and they've got page numbers for it and everything, but they all list it as being published December 1st, 1997. Do you know if they were published at the same time?
I think they were all published in 97. Okay. I know that for sure. I think it was like, it said so on the inside. Yeah, copyright 1997, but it doesn't say like the month, so I don't know exactly.
Okay. Well, because that was one of the places I saw it, and that was one of the only sources, because I don't think Wikipedia has pages.
No, not even Wikipedia. Do they have a page for the Hungarian Han Solo books?
No, they do not.
Okay, because I know the German Wikipedia equivalent, Jedipedia, does have a page about the publisher Valhalla. And it's extremely detailed. Like,
interesting.
Yeah, that one is insane. I would recommend guys checking it out using Google Translate or whatever. It's a pretty interesting read.
So I was very surprised to see that this random Star Wars reading order website had them listed, but they listed them there, and so obviously that's not where they take place. So, um, which book is it that deals with where the current events of Star Wars, as depicted in the book, takes place?
That's also what I was questioning myself when I started reading, because I went in, I think, publishing order, because on the spine it has like little numbers up here, and it says
Okay.
like 1, 3, 2, 4, and then 1, 3, 2, 5, and then the next one would be Empire, 1, 3, 2, 6, and then 1, 3, 2, 7.
Okay,
So I
so
went in that order.
is it like an ISBN type of thing?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, so I just
Okay.
went in that order. Started with Han and Chewie. It didn't have much stuff in it that was like new and explained why it took place in the Legacy era.
Yeah.
The Luke and Leia one had more interesting stuff. We're gonna get to it. Empire was fascinating, but that concerned more like the prequel era, recapping what people thought of it in the 90s.
Gotcha.
And then finally, in the last one, I got my answers. Because
Okay.
this one, it literally opens with the character in here going to Leia Organa's like tomb underneath
Yeah.
the temple on Coruscant. And it explains, oh, it has been right now, these books in universe, these chronologies, are being written as like a history report by this guy, because it's Luke and Leia's 1000th like birthday, the millennial anniversary, as I call it in my chronology.
Yeah. The millennial anniversary. So that would set them at about 980.
981 ABY. Yeah.
Interesting. So, I mean, that's just so crazy. But one of the big things is she's listed as an Organa, isn't she? The character.
Leia, yes, but I think that's explainable. Like most of her
Okay.
life, she went as like Leia Organa and then Leia Organa Solo. So fair enough. What's more
And
interesting is her descendant in here.
yeah, her descendant, and her descendant is listed as. Is she listed as a Solo?
And
The
no,
descendant.
she's named Hiria Organa.
Hiria Organa. Yeah.
Yeah, which is not necessarily a contradiction, obviously,
No.
because I mean,
Yeah.
if anything, that makes me more interested. Going around
Yeah.
getting the Organa name back. That's
And
cool.
we already have some Solo name issues because Anya Solo, where does she come from? There's no Solo men left.
Yeah.
And no children of Jason or Anakin or Jaina that we know of that's male that could carry on the name. So where's Anya Solo come from, right? And then now we have an Organa too. So clearly something happened in universe. If you're to take them into consideration, it's very intriguing. One question I had is, you were saying you were reading through them. How long did it take you to read each one? Like how many minutes?
Not long. I mean, look at them. It may be like 120 pages each, but it's like big-ish font and a bunch of pictures in between. So 20 minutes for each
20
one?
minutes, yeah.
At most half an hour.
When you got them, did you immediately read them?
Pretty much, yeah. I think I took a longer break between them because I had to read other stuff, but yeah, I got through them pretty quickly.
Yeah, those are pretty quick reads. Being so short, and like you said, with the pictures in between, so you weren't held in a state of wondering where in the chronology they take place for very long, because it wouldn't take you very long to get to the fourth one, which is where they talk about that. So you mentioned that there's some EU nods in the stories.
Oh yeah, it does treat it like I said, it mostly recaps the movies. But it does talk about, oh yeah, and then after that, like the Jedi Academy trilogy happened and Exar Kun and stuff.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Is Exar Kun actually named in it?
Oh, he's named in it. They recap
Wow.
the Old Republic comics in here, in the Jedi one.
Wow. The Tales of the Jedi comics.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
Oh yeah, here I just opened it. It mentions Onderon, Freedom.net.
Wow, that's a fan who was doing his research at the time then.
Oh, he even quotes the dialogue.
Wow. Well, our friend Marcel Ryan, who's maybe going to be watching this, he's going to be going out to buy that instantly because he's huge Tales of the Jedi fan.
Yeah. Now he has to get it and translate it.
Absolutely. Is Ulick mentioned in there?
Oh, definitely. If it recaps Tales of the Jedi.
That's
oh yeah,
crazy.
King Omen. I'm
King
just
Omen
randomly
even,
opening.
wow.
King Omen is mentioned. Yeah, it just recaps the entire story in a short time.
That's in the Jedi volume?
Yeah, in the Jedi one, which
That
makes
makes sense. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. So there's EU nods. Thrawn trilogy references. If the Jedi Academy trilogy got referenced,
yeah, I think so. What is interesting, I remember, I think it was in the Han and Chewie one. It directly mentions both the Holiday Special and Jedi Prince.
Wow.
Directly.
That's terrific.
And that alone makes this better than the official Essential Chronology by Kevin J. Anderson.
Absolutely, it does.
Oh, man.
That's incredible. Oliver was including everything then, it seems.
Not everything, which is weird, because the Han Solo one doesn't mention Freken Sel Solo.
Okay.
But I think the Corellian trilogy had come out by this point. I think 97.
Interesting. Had AC Crispin's trilogy, was that 97 as well?
I think Paradise Snare was 96 or 7. 6 or 7, I'm thinking.
So you would think that maybe he'd mention that. But what about Dark Empire could have been mentioned? Was there anything to Dark Empire?
I don't remember exactly, but I think so. Maybe. I just remember with the Luke and Leia one, he didn't go into like Luke being the Jedi Grandmaster in the Bantam era.
Okay.
He didn't really mention that, which I found weird. Yeah, so we don't get a lot of that stuff, sadly.
Gotcha. So what I'm thinking then is that for people wondering how canon this could be to the EU, wondering how in continuity it remains, it goes out of its way to mention Tales of the Jedi, the Thrawn trilogy, the Jedi Academy trilogy. It's staying in continuity with that, or making an effort to. So to me, that since it references the expanded universe, it's easier to say it could be a part of things, right? Because it's staying within that universe and making an effort to do so, which is absolutely incredible.
Yeah, even Jedi Prince and the Holiday Special.
Yeah, crazy. And, with stuff like that always, I use that to say the EU was canon. Because when a book advertises that it's only about the movies and you find an EU reference in it, to me, I'd point at that and say, see, it's all in continuity. Like the Star Wars annual books from the UK that have Darth Vader on the front from the movies that are made for kids. One of them that I own mentions Ikrit in it just out of nowhere. And like stuff like that is just so crazy to me and really cool.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, it really rings true with these books because I can't stress this enough. Like a bunch of pages in here are just recapping or like telling you what happened in A New Hope, for example, with the exact dialogue lifted. But then it talks about, oh yeah, and then Han met Kip Duran on Kessel when he was in prison.
That's so cool.
Mm-hmm. So should we take a look at my Reddit posts about these to get some of the details?
Yes. I have part 1 pulled up. I don't have the link to part 2 yet. Was there a part 2?
Oh yeah, part 2 and part 3. Yeah, I can send those to you, but let's start with part 1.
Would you like to read your post?
Sure.
I think there's translations here, so shall we read some of it?
We can definitely. I mean, I don't know how good the translation is because it was like I just put it into Google Translate because I didn't feel like putting in the work to translate it more accurately.
Do you think that after the Hungarian Han Solo novels are released, there could be more interest in doing something like this.
Translating the Heyne-Minis?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure, that would be nice. I've heard that the people who are translating the Hungarian solo books, that they were also gonna do the German Heyne-Minis. But
Oh,
I'm not
interesting.
sure how far they are into that. I just know I remember thinking, oh, please don't pause your work on the Hungarian books for these, because they are interesting, but
Yeah.
the Han Solo books are actual novels and
Yeah.
are therefore more interesting. Like, I want to read those as quickly as possible.
Yeah. They're really, really great. I read the first one when it kind of leaked in like 2021, I think.
Same.
It
And
was
I
really
think I was the main reason they took it down, because I saw it, I took it, and then I somewhat spread it around.
Yeah, it was because you spread it around that I got it too, I think. Well, someone mentioned it and I went to the forum and found it. It was
Yep.
really great. I really liked it. It stayed pretty much in, like, it felt tonally like the Brian Daley
Oh
Han
yeah.
Solo novels.
You can definitely tell that was an author who really cared. And I mean, as we know, the author himself also thought like that was legitimate. Like, he didn't
Yeah.
know about the publisher essentially going rogue and doing all
Yeah.
this stuff.
It's so hilarious to me that all these publishers were willing to cross Lucasfilm to try to make a quick buck. It's crazy.
Mhm.
So here's chapter 1 of.
Oh no, let's scroll up a bit when I talk about the Han book. I'm curious if there's
Oh
anything.
yeah, here's
Oh
the
yeah,
Han
okay.
book.
Oh yeah, so
So,
I just say that I was kind of disappointed with it.
and you said for the most part, this
Mhm.
little book just tells Han and Chewie's life story as we know it. But since this came out in 1997, some stuff is missing, like Drakkensal Solo for some reason, which we just talked about.
Mhm.
Stuff like Jedi Prince or the Holiday Specials mentioned though, which we talked about, which that's really cool. It's split into 7 chapters, all of which start with
Oh yeah, and
this text.
that's the translation. So every book is separated into little chapters, and they all start with this New Republic holo message, and then some weird dates that I don't know if they mean anything. Source: Journal of the Wills.
That's
To
very interesting.
to Senator Hiria Organa from the historian Helsik about certain topics, and the topics is mostly what changes with each chapter, obviously.
Mm.
So yeah, this is just essentially like an email conversation between the historian character Helsik and Senator Hiria Organa.
You said here that it's taking place at 1000 ABY, but it's more like 980.
Oh yeah, that was before I read the
980.
final book. I knew
Gotcha.
for sure. That was the date the German website had listed.
So Halsik basically is a historian. I've been reading through Supernatural Encounters, what's been released so far, and I've been loving it. But it features a historian as the main character, Arhul Hextrafon. He's going through the history of the galaxy. Halsik, likewise, is a historian who's recapping the movies and sending the information he's gathered to a descendant. Basically, is kind of the premise.
Essentially, that is the premise, yeah. As we learned in the last book, because it's the millennial anniversary of not Han, Luke and Leia's birth. And there is some world building also going on, which is a whole other topic because it's not elaborated on. So there's a lot, open. Let me think. But yeah, that's the confusing part, kind of. So we get that he's researching all these topics and making these books, essentially. And he's in correspondence with Senator Hiria Organa, obviously because she's a descendant. I don't understand, like, the source, Journal of the Wills. I don't know if this is him saying this is where I got my information from.
Yeah.
I guess that's what it could mean. And in the book itself, he also mentions, like, another historian. I don't remember his name right now. I think I mentioned it in a later Reddit post. But there's mentions of, like, holocrons being published about Luke Skywalker's life and, like, philosophical discussions about the events of the past, which is very interesting. But again, that's just like, it's world building for this era that we don't really see anything about.
And we never get to see that
Yeah.
era. So that's interesting that he was willing to go and add all that detail. What I'm wondering is, are the books themselves set up as being in universe, similar to how Book of Sith or the Jedi Path established themselves as in universe books?
Kind of. I'm looking at the first one right now. It basically opens with, yeah, like I said, the little text about this is the message. The source to Hiri Organa from the historian, and then it just straight up goes into Han's life story. Han Solo, in his time, he was this type of person, and now let's take a look how he became this. And
Right.
every now and then, Helzig, as a character, throws in his thoughts and stuff.
He
But yeah,
makes
so it
commentary
is
almost. Then, like he throws in his own
kind of,
opinions
especially
on it.
especially with Luke. He talks about him. There's a great little paragraph, which I hope I translated on here because I really loved it, where he talks about Luke Skywalker was such a great person because he realized how small he truly was in the greater things.
That's
So
interesting.
yeah, stuff like that is in. So I would say it's set up as an in-universe book, but on a smaller scale, like compared to like
Right.
Jedi Path, which also has like characters making notes and stuff.
That's that. I didn't mind the notes, but everyone else, it seems, in the entire world hated those little notations.
I mean, I like them, especially from Palpatine, because he's so petty when he writes into a Jedi school book about how the Jedi Order sucks and he destroyed them.
Yeah, there's some funny stuff in there. And then I like Mace Windu leaves notes in the Book of the Sith, like, and all of his comments are like Jedi rhetoric. Just like he's just putting down like he's almost like putting down Jedi propaganda in the Book of Sith. It's quite funny. So other than recounting A New Hope, and mentioning Jedi Prince and Holiday Special, there's not really anything else notable in Han and Chewbacca.
Not that much. Like I said, it recaps some EU stuff from the Bantam era, but overall, it's a chronology. But I was expecting like more of the. I was more curious about the backstory, when this is set in the Legacy era, and I didn't get it in this book, sadly.
So it just left you with questions after you read this one.
Yes, kind of, because the first book allegedly doesn't have an explanation what like this intro means.
Yeah, wow.
Who is Helzig? Who is Hiri Organa? What?
Yeah, that's. And how much do they flesh it out later? There's like Heria visits the tomb of Leia, right? Or is it Halsik that does that?
Helzig goes to the tomb. That's in the opening of the last book. Hiri Organa as a character doesn't show up. Basically, she just gets Helzig's emails.
Okay, gotcha. Interesting. So Halsik, though, does appear in the narrative later on?
He talks about it like, oh, we went down to Leia's tomb, and then he goes back into the history.
That's so interesting that Oliver would, as an author, take the time to establish this.
Yeah, I mean,
that's so crazy to me. That's
crazy.
Crazy.
That's when you can tell why he was like the president of the Star Wars fan club. Because if this was just like a cash grab kind of like, oh, we make some small young readers books, make them cheap, just recapping the movies and some EU stuff because that's also Star Wars. But no, he tries to throw in an actual narrative, and he got away with it.
I wonder if he was. I wonder. It seems like it's all a little vague. I wonder if it had to be vague to like slip an editor's notice. Do you think?
Maybe, but the setup, like especially maybe by the fourth book they stopped caring because the Jedi Knights one really has like the most direct world building stuff in that regard.
Maybe he hid that one from his editor.
Maybe.
So moving on to Luke and Leia.
Mm-hmm.
You said this one is more interesting and actually has completely new material.
Exactly.
But it dedicates 3 chapters to Vader, Obi-Wan, and Yoda, respectively. And the Luke-Leia portion only deals with their lives leading up to and during the original trilogy. Nothing of the EU post-Return of the Jedi. Here are the first 2 chapters, translated into English via Google Translate.
Oh yeah, that's when he talks about the holocron. Luke Skywalker and the Republic. That's in that chapter.
So do you want to read this aloud?
Yeah, sure. I don't know if it's disclaimer. I don't know if this is all grammatically correct because Google Translate.
Yeah.
Okay. In a discussion of his holocron, Luke Skywalker and the Republic, a very critical re-examination of Skywalker and his aftermath in the galaxy, in galactic history, I guess this is supposed to mean. I accused Warafisk of legitimately criticizing the historical aftermath of the Jedi, in my opinion, sometimes wrongly belittled. We couldn't deepen the controversy at the time, but I think we touched on a very interesting point. Where do you get great historical figures? Our awareness of history has completely changed since the fall of the Empire. Today, we no longer believe that history is being made, story happens. In our imagination today, it is the movement of enormous impersonal social forces which, although they work through people and express themselves in human will and action, we can basically influence as little as natural forces. Instead, we try to recognize the laws behind their work just as the natural sciences, with sensational success, try to recognize and decipher the laws of nature. Historical research is today, consciously or unconsciously, in the process of approaching the natural sciences. One could say that it is trying to move from a humanistic to an exact science. That would undoubtedly be a tremendous step forward. If it did, we would become masters of our own history. However, there would then be no great personalities, no more historical heroes. Greatness, heroism was no longer needed.
This is very interesting after that first paragraph. I wanted to pause for a second and ask, in German, this is pretty deep and pretty nuanced. What's being discussed here? Is it that way even in the original German language, to where a child would
definitely.
have
I
a
was
hard
surprised
time
by it.
understanding this, huh?
Yeah, that's why I was surprised by it. That it's clearly aimed at children, but I mean, this stuff is
This looks pretty good. It's very interesting, especially. It's not recapping the movies. It's having someone in the future, like, basically sum up, like, what makes historical figures great, and it's very interesting. So is the historian mentioned Warafisk, a rival of Helsick? Or
apparently that's like his only mention, I think. But yeah, this just says like, oh, he's another historian. They had a debate about his points.
I wonder, do you think they're intended to be humans? Because Helsick and Warafisk are very interesting names.
Yeah, I don't think his species is hinted at. So it could be anything.
Yeah, and what's weird is kind of that their two names are very similar. So yeah. I wonder why that was done that way.
Yeah, I guess you could headcanon it. Maybe it is a alien species.
Maybe even like a relative.
Yeah, or not necessarily relative. Maybe like the Chiss, where they also have like similar naming conventions.
Yeah.
So same species. Yeah, that could be the case. I'm sure we need to get Joe Bongiorno on this. He has to work this in his work somehow.
Into I'm sure encounters.
I'm sure he would come up with something interesting here.
Yeah, definitely.
Small thing that's right here in the first sentence. They are still in a republic in the
Interesting, because it's a galactic alliance, right? And fell empire by
Well, at the end of the Legacy comics, that's also not true, because we have the Galactic Triumvirate.
The Galactic Triumvirate, yeah.
Yeah, so it's not really far-fetched to say there is, like, 900 years later, there's going to be another republic.
Yeah. That would mean chronologically there's the Republic, the Empire, the New Republic, then it's the Galactic Alliance, right?
Yeah.
But then it's the Fell Empire and the Galactic Alliance kind of battling. Then it's the Galactic Triumvirate, and then around 800 years after, it's a New Republic again.
Yeah.
Now, to be fair, at the time of writing this, Oliver wouldn't have been able to read the New Jedi Order, which establishes that the New Republic dissolves into the Galactic Alliance.
Exactly. He was going by the 1997,
Yeah, what they had at the
logic that was
time.
established.
But that can still be explained, like you said, governments rise and fall. Yeah.
Exactly. So I don't see this as a problem at all.
The historical conscience of the New Republic is determined by anonymous, uncontrolled developments that change the galaxy before our eyes, without it being possible to say what sets it in motion, according to which laws they run and where they take us. The sudden disappearance of thousand-year-old states, the unexplained disappearance of the Jedi Knights. Here, we'll pause here. What's going on here? Is he saying that the Jedi have disappeared?
I have to read this again in German. I don't know if this is because of the English translation, but the state of the Jedi Order is very ambiguous in these books, in the last one. Because at one point, he mentions there was a Jedi, the last Jedi, called Erebuscan, being executed on Coruscant years ago. Yes, but in the same book, he mentions, oh, we went down to Leia Organa's tomb, and a knight from the Order took us down there. So at the same time, are the Jedi wiped out or not? They have disappeared, and it's kind of that this part with disappeared. I don't remember if this was in the German text. I have to check. But yeah, it's ambiguous, like the state of the Jedi.
Okay.
What we do learn is later on, when we get to that part, the core worlds specifically don't like the Jedi, and they don't want to celebrate Luke and Leia's birthday.
How insane is it that Oliver called that all the way back then? Because Fate of the Jedi, I know your opinions on Legacy of the Force and Fate of the Jedi, but Fate of the Jedi literally plays out that story with the government and Coruscant becoming disenfranchised with the Jedi, becoming frustrated with them. So Oliver it's kind of ahead of its time with like this concept, because it kind of is expanded on in Fate of the Jedi, which is kind of interesting. The disillusion of traditional taboos and the rapid mechanization of the galaxy, the tremendous acceleration of social changes that used to take centuries and are now taking place within a single generation. What is causing all this? What is at work? We've traded our earlier helplessness towards history. We feel elemental forces, historical collective forces, before which the greatest being becomes a dwarf. And if these dwarfs, who are the biggest thing in the galaxy, still dare to take on these elemental forces, to want great things, to want something at all, to throw their will and their reason into the scales, if they master the uncontrollable, want to shape the unformable, then something like pity interferes with our admiration, and our hero worship takes on tender, ironic streak. What we admire about the historical heroes today is simply no longer what they have mastered. History is simply no longer that they have mastered history, made history. In the end, no one has that. Rather, we are amazed that, thanks to a touching historical effort, they have a trace in history at all have left behind. But with that back to Skywalker and the Republic, if you measure it against the course of history, it was just an incident, and in 100 years it will make no difference whatsoever to the state of the New Republic if it still exists. Whether he was one or not. But if you compare what he dared, what he took up with, how he persevered in adversity, how he forced happiness, and what he forced out of himself, then I see, I can't help it, a hero in him. Especially since he took himself less seriously than the others in all the highest risk. In all extreme tension. He was a hero even though, or maybe because, he realized how small he was. I really like that.
Mm-hmm.
That's really nice.
Yeah, that was a definite highlight in the book.
Even through Google Translate, this is written incredibly well.
Yeah.
Way better than I was expecting. Is even the recap of the movies written so complexly?
No, I wouldn't call it complexly. I think the recap of the movies is pretty much the exact dialogue and then just what happens in the scenes. But yeah, this stuff, that's the good stuff in there.
That's great. I like that analysis of Luke. it's interesting that he would say in 100 years it won't matter, because it's been 900, right? So, and it still matters at this point, right? So what's going to change in 100 years? But it's interesting also that he suggests the New Republic might not exist in 100 years. Perhaps that's showing how frequently the governments change over and shift over, that he thinks it won't exist there. That further lends to the idea that it could rise again, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. I don't remember if he talks in the sense of like at that point when Skywalker lived, like when Luke was alive, from Luke's POV 100 years in the future, or from Helsig's POV 100 years, which would be over 1,000 years after. But yeah, both works, like you said.
Yeah. Now, something I wanted to ask. This is chapter 1 of Luke and Leia.
Mm-hmm.
And it has nothing to do with recapping the movies. It's just
so far not.
It's just an essay about what makes a hero and how governments rise and fall, kind of.
Yep.
That's insane. I wasn't expecting that it would start this way.
Yeah. That's why I said this is already better than the Han and Chewie one.
Yeah. Do you want to read a bit of chapter 2?
I could, sure. Okay, this one is interesting because this is a story. Like, this first chapter was an essay, like you said. It makes sense because you're going to give us Luke and Leia's life stories, throwing in a little essay. But chapter 2 is an actual story about Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Wow.
Which is insane to me. Because it's not even like framed like Helsig is telling this.
It's narrative.
Yeah. Okay, so let's take a look. The day promised to be beautiful. The morning mist had left a slight film of moisture on the sand dunes. This will help my brother's vaporizers, Obi-Wan Kenobi thought. The early morning sun animated Obi-Wan. The air enriched with moisture was good for his lungs, after all. He had spent the last few weeks in the artificial atmosphere of the most scrap-ripe spaceship he had ever known. Or rather, that he could remember, he corrected himself. Tatooine was not known for the good air, however. Actually, the desert planet was not even known because of it. Orbited by double suns, it was remote in the outer rim territories of the galaxy, very remote. But that came in handy for Kenobi. He sought the seclusion of his brother Owen's farm, and you could say what you wanted of Tatooine. The lump of sand was secluded. He had come a long way through the desert since leaving the city that night unnoticed. It was a long walk to his brother's farm for a pedestrian, but the baby in his arms had been quiet, slept all the way.
Wow.
Yep.
Wow. Wow. This
Nice.
is crazy. I like this. Even though it doesn't really fit, it's pretty great.
It is pretty great. That's why when I was reading this, I was like, oh my god, this is well done. I want this to work in canon.
Like, right now, my mind is going through the gymnastics of how can I make this work?
Yeah, it's insane. Oh, man. Let's see. The point that indicated the presence of other beings was now clearly visible and came towards him to his right across the great salt flat. It was not yet clear what it was. Only one thing was clear. It was a vehicle controlled by intelligence. An ancient aphorism that Kenobi had once heard crossed his mind. As he remembered, it had been about two men, an old and a young. The younger one had said, "No news is good news," and the other, an old Jedi Master, had wisely replied, "That doesn't have to be true, my young friend. A fisherman does not consider himself happy if the fish do not bite." He wasn't entirely sure that this anecdote was a suitable analogy for the moment, because he couldn't quite agree with the Master. In the meantime, the driver of the vehicle had also noticed Kenobi and was heading for him. So,
let's take a break here and talk about this Jedi Master saying. It doesn't name the Jedi Master. This analogy here, I wouldn't say it's too far of a stretch to think Qui-Gon could say something like that to Obi-Wan. You know what I mean? That sounds like Qui-Gon, something he would say.
Yeah, it's more like a story he was told about an old and a young Jedi.
Yeah. Oh, right. Okay, I see that now. Yeah. Interesting. It's very interesting. So, like, even within this story narrative, he's recounting another story. It's very interesting. And again, it's the same amount of like nuance to this in the German language.
Oh yeah, it is, I would say.
That it's I feel like kids would have a hard time reading this beyond the recaps of the films.
Yeah, maybe not like for like maybe this wasn't intended for 6-year-olds. Let's say 14,
Yeah,
12 to 14-year-olds should be able to read this. But I mean, so far, you could tell me this was like a Star Wars Insider or like Adventure Journal short, and I could believe you.
I could believe that this was like Lone Wolf, the story published by Abel G. Pena.
Oh, that's what it reminded me of, obviously, because of the subject as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I can take this paragraph if you'd like.
All right, sure.
Kenobi realized that the vehicle was an old-fashioned glider. He made no attempt to escape. He couldn't have escaped the glider anyway. He just stopped and waited for the vehicle to come in a wide arc. The skid stopped abruptly, and a low cloud of sand swept up to Obi-Wan's right. Then the howl of the land glider diminished to a low humming sound as the driver switched to idle. "Where are you going, old man? Are you lost?" asked the grim-looking man. The confrontation with a hostile environment seemed carved into his face. His graying hair was frozen in tangled strands, like plaster spirals. Dust covered his face, clothes, hands, and thoughts, but the body was still powerful when the mind wasn't anymore. Obi-Wan looked deep into the face of the man he had known since childhood, and yet he was not recognized himself. Had he changed so much over the years? Was he so different from young Obi-Wan? Admittedly, he had seen a lot, but when he looked in the mirror, there was no stranger there. There were a lot of wrinkles running through his face, but there was no concern in his blue eyes. Yet somehow he wasn't the same for his brother. How long was it since he last saw his brother? It had actually been decades. The fall of the Republic, the Clone Wars, the rise of the Emperor, and now the Jedi Pursuits. That's interesting. Different name for the Jedi Purge.
I think
the
that
Jedi
might just be
Pursuits.
because of I think that may just be because of the translation, but
Okay.
yeah.
But essentially, Jedi Purge.
Yeah, exactly.
This is what they knew of the prequel era in the 90s, right? Clone Wars, the Republic fell, the Emperor arose, the Jedi were hunted down.
Yeah,
right.
That was known since the New Hope novelization.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Now, Obi-Wan only really realized that almost half a human life had passed since he and his brother had split up in unargument, I should say. Obi-Wan became a farmer and Kenobi joined the Jedi Knights. While Owen tried to earn a meager income from the sand, Obi-Wan rose in the hierarchy of the Republic. But the days of the Old Republic were numbered. Kenobi was thrown into the turmoil of the Clone Wars, and his student Anakin Skywalker had fallen for the dark side. That's remarkably consistent so far. Would you like to take this? That's a very interesting statement. The Clone Wars had gone bad for the Jedi Knights.
Yeah. Oh, this is going to be interesting when we get to the Empire one, which I didn't do translations because that one is worth to get translated fully.
Okay.
Because it has a lot of
Imperium, Das Imperium, the Empire one has like the most content to it.
For the prequels, yes, because that one doesn't work in continuity at all, but it's written in the 90s what the author imagined the Clone Wars would be.
Yeah.
And I guess it would still work in universe if you say, oh, the historian Helzig just has wrong information. I mean, it has been 1,000 years. So that's fine.
Absolutely.
Okay, so this part. The Clone Wars had gone bad for the Jedi Knights. In an emergency, Obi-Wan had broken the Jedi Code and trained a student himself, Anakin. This is interesting phrasing because that fits with Phantom Menace.
That does
somehow.
fit.
In an emergency, Obi-Wan had broken the Jedi code and trained a student himself. That fits. That actually fits. That's insane.
That's really crazy.
Huh. Too late, Kenobi realized his interest in the dark side, and the war was lost. But Anakin's wife was pregnant and had given birth to twins, Luke and Leia. Kenobi immediately sensed their sensitivity to the Force. She was as strong as their fathers, but Anakin would seduce the children to the dark side or even kill them. That couldn't happen. So Obi-Wan decided to hide the children. He had given Leia to his friend Bail Organa on Alderaan, and he was holding Luke in his arms. The children should grow up with adoptive parents and not know about their past. That was the best protection against the attack of Anakin and the Emperor. Obi-Wan had chosen his brother for Luke, only he didn't know about his luck. Obi-Wan closed his mind to the memories. There was no more time to waste on such distractions, he told himself. He carried responsibility for the future of the galaxy in his arms. He hoped Luke was strong. Growing up wouldn't be easy. A protection and blessings, he finally called out to his brother. He hesitated for a moment, and then his eyes narrowed. Ben. So that's what Owen said. And that's where the chapter ends.
That's... Okay, one comment I have. It doesn't mention what happens to Padme.
Right. Because back then the authors thought, oh, she survived. Because Leia in Return of the Jedi talks about, her dying.
And then there's
very young.
the whole thing in the Bantam era of someone claims to be Luke's mother. It would have been really bad if that hadn't turned out to be a ruse.
Mm-hmm.
But they kept, protection and blessings is an interesting thing.
I have to double check what he said in German to see if this is
it more
accurate.
Is it more like something about the Force being?
No. I think this is just a. Oh yeah, he does say protection and blessing, like that's the literal translation, but yeah. I mean, I like that. I like that kind of how it sounds in the German one.
Yeah, I like it. I like it as well. So that's very interesting. And is that after what chapter do they start recapping the movies rather than?
Well, that with the movies they mostly did in the. Okay, let me look. So this was chapter 2. Chapter 3, Goodbye from Tatooine. Yeah, this talks about Luke grew up with Owen and Beru, and then it goes into New Hope.
Does it go into specific details of his childhood at all? Like, is there any narrative short story to it?
No short story. Oh, wait. No, it just talks about like Beggar's Canyon and him flying.
That's cool. Yeah.
So yeah, that's in here, but no larger narrative.
So basically, just what they knew at the time about Luke's adventures on Tatooine before A New Hope.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm looking for part 2. Aha, found it. Let me share this. So did you have to type them all up to? Did you have to physically type up?
Yes, I had stories? To. I had to because there's no digital copy. So yeah, I just sat there, typed the whole chapter, but it was worth it, I would say.
Definitely. Thank you for your work doing that. And until we have an actual translation, this Google I missed these posts somehow, but these Google translations are pretty great.
Mm-hmm. Okay, this is where I say like this book is worth getting translated completely, and I just made like some the 5 most important points that I took from this book. Oh yeah, there it is. Das Imperium, the Empire, which is actually worthy of getting a complete translation. I will only give you some of the most interesting stuff. Okay, it came out 1997 before the prequels happened, and therefore we have a lot of simply wrong and or made up stuff in here. So the important things from the first few chapters. There is talk about Palpatine being born into a noble life, but of course no mention of Naboo, and how he started to get into the galactic politics. There is no real mention that he's connected with the Sith or anything. It just states that no one knew that Palpatine knew the secrets of the dark side.
Which that can fit.
Yeah, and I mean it makes sense with like even Dark Empire and stuff. The authors back then it seems like they didn't know what Sith really were or if Palpatine even was one. There was a certain like uncertainty about that.
Yeah.
So this is fine. The Republic is pretty much described like she was in Alan Dean Foster's prologue from the novelization. It's rotting from the inside with greed and corruption.
That's something I've thought about before. Did we really see much of that greed and corruption in the Republic as presented in the prequel era? Because I think they presented it as not as greedy or corrupt as I would have thought based on how Alan Dean Foster described it in the original novelization. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah. I get that.
It's more like social, like high social class. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Rather than like they go see operas and stuff. Like is that greed or like, you know what I mean? I would have expected to see more like greed and corruption from the senators. I don't think we really got many stories about stuff like that.
Not really. Yeah, you're right. Okay. There is talks about the Republic having multiple civil wars, which led to Palpatine, a charismatic fellow, to get into a strong position of power, becoming president of the Republic. Still fits because he wasn't called chancellor by that point.
Yeah.
He would later then demand to become emperor, which the Senate agreed because they thought they could use and manipulate Palpatine. This also fits with the prologue from the New Hope novel, which also claims, Palpatine became a puppet, which obviously isn't true. And obviously, in continuity, that would still make sense that senators thought we can use him to our advantage or something. And
even
now
even when they gave him emergency powers, even when he declared himself emperor, senators probably could still think that they could use Palpatine to their own advantage. I would think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then the last 2 points are pretty much not reconcilable, but it's very interesting, like alternate universe stuff. Reminder, 1997. Okay. Under the leadership of Mon Mothma, Bail Organa, and Garm Bel Iblis, the Jedi Knights grouped together to fight against this new regime. But Palpatine's army and fleet soon proved to be too strong for the Republic Jedi task forces. There weren't any open conflicts, the book claims, but Palpatine soon had enough of the Jedi, and so he and his new apprentice Darth Vader, along with a group of Darksiders, started to hunt down the Jedi Knights.
Okay, the group of Darksiders can be explained as Inquisitors.
Can be.
Open conflicts.
Guess...
It wasn't a battle, it was more like assassination in the back. They did.
But I'm thinking this whole point could still work, in the way it's described here. If we move it somewhat into the Dark Times era, like you said, Darksiders, Inquisitors, under the leadership of Mon Mothma, Bail Organa, and Garm Bel Iblis, the Jedi Knights grouped together to fight his new regime.
That's almost like I know you don't like The Force Unleashed, and several other people don't because of. That's pretty much The Force Unleashed.
Yeah.
Ram Koda.
I mean, again, we have we have to check the actual book again, what the chapters say, but in this description, we can explain this away.
And also, I'd point out, Palpatine soon had enough of the Jedi. He was capturing them. The Dark Times comic literally shows him capturing Jedi and taking them to his throne room. So, that can be explained as he was rounding up Jedi, and capturing them and stuff.
Mm-hmm. And now the 5th point.
Oh
that one doesn't work, but it's interesting. Palpatine made a treaty with the Jedi to keep his Imperial fleet at a smaller size, because he apparently didn't want a full-out war with the Jedi Order. The book says Palpatine wanted the Jedi to see how his empire brought justice and order to the galaxy. But the Jedi wanted to move against his regime. So Palpatine started the Clone Wars, in which he sends hordes of cloned troopers into battles against the Republic and the Jedi. So basically, the book was under the assumption the Empire was formed while the Republic was still a thing, and those two factions went against each other.
Yeah, interesting.
Palpatine's clone army won, simply because it was larger in numbers. And after some unsuccessful peace talks, and during the following Second Clone Wars, which lasted a couple of weeks, Palpatine destroyed all of the Republic fleet and took over worlds such as Alderaan, now with his empire being the only big galactic government, and then the hunt for the Jedi continued after that.
That's very hard to be reconciled, but it's very interesting. I almost like that description of the Clone Wars better than what the prequels did, funnily enough.
Yeah, I think this is the general, maybe not in specifics, but generally this is what people thought before the prequels came out, how this would go.
Yeah, that sounds really cool. Especially the idea of having the Clone Wars not just one big war, but separated into separate ones.
Yeah, Clone Wars.
Yeah,
not,
Clone
you know, not
Wars. Yeah.
singular.
That's very, very interesting. Very interesting stuff there for sure. See, with some of the stuff that doesn't exactly fit in these, like for example, Owen being Obi-Wan's brother, like literally source books in the 90s from West End Games mentioned Owen, the brother of Obi-Wan. There's lots of
Exactly.
places that do, so I'm willing to overlook that. I'm willing to overlook the stuff here, considering only that this is 1,000 years into the future, and Halsik has some really sketchy sources.
Yeah, that's why it's perfect. Like, it's in universe. You can just say, oh, the character like is wrong because it has been so long.
Exactly, it's lost to history.
Mhm.
I also like that idea of time passing, and that, you know, in the grand scheme of things, just like stuff doesn't become important anymore. So it's kind of cool to think that the adventures, the main events of Star Wars, could mean nothing in 1,000 years on from there. The galaxy could have forgotten, and to me, that adds a mystery to it that I kind of enjoy.
I like the idea with like the point here with Palpatine and the second Clone Wars and stuff. People just like not knowing their history. And like, oh, we know the Clone Wars was a big conflict. Who knows how it started? It was a mess.
Yeah.
It's like people nowadays with World War I. Who knows how that started?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's good stuff.
Yeah, I like it. It's very fun. All right. Here's the third post that you made. You called it Part 3, Leia's dead.
Yeah, because that was the biggest thing, and I had to just tell it to people right away.
And although we probably could have assumed that by she's not in the Legacy comics and humans don't live long, this was actual confirmation of a body.
This is the only confirmation we ever get.
Yeah, that's
one of
true.
The OT characters is dead.
That's true. We get confirmation for Luke, because of a Force Ghost in Legacy.
No. I remember it was Sura Stoney or Shelley Shapiro. They said in like a Force.net forum, oh, no, we don't say Luke is dead. That doesn't have to be. That could be a Force Ghost projection from the other side of the galaxy.
True. That's true. That's
I don't like that idea at all, but they left it open.
That sounds eerily close to what Disney Star Wars did in Last Jedi. Not sure I like that.
I mean, Dark Empire did it first. Force projection.
Yes, you're right about that. Now, to me, if you consider the Force Ghost means Luke's dead, and then the tomb for Leia, that means Han's the only surviving character. So Han lived for centuries.
Yeah, great, because we have no confirmation for him.
We have no confirmation for Han. Han is immortal. All right. Part 3, Leia's dead, which is, again, terrific title. So a while ago, I made a post about the existence of these 4 unofficial German young adult books, chronologies by Oliver Denker. Then I made another post talking about the first 2 books on a Chewbacca, as well as Luke and Leia. Then I made a post about the 3rd book. Now here we are talking about the final book in the series, The Jedi Ritter, which means the Jedi Knights, which has the most interesting new stuff in it. Let's begin with this translation of the first chapter. I use Google Translate again because I'm lazy. Would you like to read this part?
I would. All right. A question before we start. Do you also have internet problems right now? Because I'm afraid.
Glitching?
No, a little bit. It was a little bit robotic voice for me. I'm just afraid my internet is going to cut out.
I have internet right now.
Okay. You sound fine to me right now, so it should be working. When the knight, seconded from the order, led us through the catacombs under the Coruscant Palace, where Leia Organa is buried, which is not open to the public, he said after a minute of remembrance on the sarcophagus, Leia Organa, a great woman of the Republic. And that's all we get for this plot point, by the way.
Before we move on, I have a comment here. It's interesting that it's not open to the public. I don't know why that would be. Is it? It's almost like they look at disdain for those characters.
Or maybe it's a holy place. That would also work if it's like a holy place people are not allowed to go to. But there is stuff in here later where it seems like the core worlds really don't like Luke and Leia. So let's see how this goes.
Now, Leia wasn't really a Jedi by 1997. She'd done some Jedi training, right? Planet of Twilight. So,
she did. But she was mostly the politician and face of the Republic.
Yeah. So it's interesting that the Jedi Knight. It makes sense that the Jedi Knight would have great remembrance and respect for her and reverence, because beyond the politician, she's also a Jedi. But it's interesting that she's described as a great woman of the Republic. Again, we didn't really have Jedi Master, Jedi Knight Leia, whatever she was, until after 97. So that makes sense.
The souvenir seller at Del Arit on Coruscant asked, "Were you shown the tower room where Skywalker lived?" And the innkeeper on Endor had detailed information about General Kenobi. These may have been accidental experiences without any claim to general validity, and yet on the long journey to the sites of the rebirth of the Republic, it seemed as if the memory of these people had not completely died out. So this is interesting. Again, lore and world building for this era that we're not going to see any more of. An innkeeper on Endor is interesting because it sounds like Endor now has like more of a civilization on there.
That's what I was about to say. Yeah. Also, the tower room Skywalker lived, was he imprisoned?
The tower? No, I think I took that as he lived like. Didn't he live in like the Imperial Palace or something in the Thrawn trilogy, like somewhere high up, a tower room, so to speak?
You're right. Yeah. I was taking that as, wait a minute, was Luke thrown in a medieval prison, up in a tower? Yeah, you're probably right. Skyscraper, essentially.
Yeah, so yeah, that makes sense. Again, good paragraph. I like it.
Yeah.
Okay, a direct continuation here. It seemed as if the memory of these people had not completely died out. What one cannot say with a clear conscience about the core worlds. In any case, for our officials, who are usually so happy to celebrate their jubilee, the millennial return of the birth of Leia Organa was not important enough to commemorate her. The Jedi Knights, whose life for many historians is identical to the most glamorous epoch in Republican history, do not deserve so much disinterest. To mourn this lost paradise or to dream some dreams of ancient glory would be as idle as it is out of time. But that does not mean to suppress the past that has become history.
Interesting. So that's what gives us where this book takes place. Post-Legacy. And I would say it's still, like, would you say the storyteller would take place before this or after this?
I would say after, because it simply seems way too, like, post-apocalyptic in a way.
I agree.
This one seems like on a downfall of like the Jedi and everything.
Because it seems like the Jedi are more or less gone again, which is kind of depressing. And it seems like there's corruption once again in the New Republic. It seems like it's hinted at. So it's like on a decline for the government.
It seems that way.
Yeah. So I had originally put Storyteller on my timeline at 1000 ABY. But that's only a short 20 years later. So that means if you're putting Storyteller on your chronology, you probably have to put more space in between it if you're assigning it a year.
Oh, yeah.
Because of this in 980 ABY, if you're taking this into consideration. And so, like, I'm working on a project where it's just, like, chronological order of the media. So while Noah's is a written summary basically of events and in-universe chronology, mine is basically summarizing the out-of-universe media and putting it in a list to which I think everything goes in. So that would mean I'd have to put more space between storyteller and this. So definitely not 1000 ABY because I assign dates based on my best guess for even the stuff that we don't know for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, I mean with storyteller, the opening says like a long time from now.
From now, yeah.
So you have to count by like our years, and then even more into the future. When did it come out? Like 2003?
It's something so like that.
So it has to be like post 2000 ABY in the Star Wars galaxy.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. Yeah. Because absolutely. Then there's also the fourth precept, which while we're talking about these kind of post-legacy stories, the fourth precept, some people thought it was the beginning, but then Legacy Volume 4, the Epic Collection, put it in the very back after Legacy 2 and after the Storyteller.
Yeah.
Which was really cool to me that they went to that detail.
Which is interesting since you brought it up, but that is kind of also in conflict with what they claim on the back of the Epic Collection, where they say at the very end of the Legends timeline, discover the final fate of C-3PO. So it's still a bit ambiguous what we're going to do with that.
That's true. Interesting. Some people think it's the beginning and the end at once.
Yeah, which I think that's a nice idea, in a way.
And one reason I point to for why it's not the beginning is Coruscant is shown in it, and it's shown to be a cityscape. Or at least a planet like Coruscant. It's got like the rings, like you know how Coruscant has like the ringed look to it? The planet from orbit. It has that look to it. So it must be civilized Coruscant. So that's why I think it goes at the end. But if it takes place at the end and the beginning, that's a terrific thing, because then for EU fans who want to read the expanding universe in chronological order, once you get to the storyteller and then the fourth precept, just go right back to Dawn of the Jedi and keep going. Then you can just keep your chronological read through going for forever.
Yeah,
but
nice.
Back to the minis. Sorry for that little tangent there. This is very interesting. I like that they said it on the millennial birth of Leia and Luke.
I like how they highlight. What I like is this book highlights Leia way more than Luke, like in this paragraph.
Yeah.
Yeah, because he specifically is like, oh, the birth of Leia Organa was not important enough to be celebrated. Because it seems like Helzig is very, very much crediting her with like creating the government that they still... Which, I mean, historically is definitely true.
Yeah.
And I mean, he's
especially considering if this comes from the Galactic Alliance, Leia helped to establish that as well. You know?
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah. So that you say, so that fully explains the in-universe story of these four books. We now know they are written by a historian called Halsik, who's in contact with the descendant of Leia named Haria Organa, and now we know that he wrote these because of Luke and Leia's birthday, which also dates the story to take place in the year 981 ABY. We also know that Leia is buried on Coruscant. Would you say this one's worth translating in full?
Or is there
a lot of movie stuff?
Definitely translating in full. This one and the Empire one. They both have still like movie stuff in it, because obviously, but that is worth translating completely.
Definitely.
Oh, and this is the interesting part. There was also this part which I found interesting. Between the founding of the Old Republic and the execution of the last Jedi, Erebuskin, on Coruscant, lie the millennia in which the steep rise and deep fall of the Jedi Order took place. And this is worded just as like vague in the German original, where it's like, I don't exactly know what he's getting at. I looked up if Erebuskin was like a character that I missed in something, but apparently he's original.
Yeah, I don't recall that name at all.
Because he lists him alongside the Tales of the Jedi characters at one point. That's what
he lists him alongside the Tales of the Jedi characters?
I think so, because I looked them up. It was some of the side characters from the like Freedom Net Uprising and stuff, which the names sounded familiar, and I looked them all up, but then I got to Erebuskin, and there was like, because it was just like he listed famous Jedis of galactic history.
Gotcha. Right. Yeah. Okay. So it's not suggesting that perhaps he's a long-lived species who was around at the Tales of the Jedi era. He's listing the most famous of all time.
Don't think so. Just among the famous Jedi, apparently.
It's interesting that it says he's the execution of the Last Jedi, Erebuskin.
Yeah, but the way
scrolling up, right here, there's a knight seconded from the Order. That doesn't say Jedi Order, but
yeah, but also
that's in the Jedi, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm assuming. But also, I think both this English one and the German original, it's phrased in a way where Last Jedi doesn't mean like he was the last Jedi to exist. It means like, oh, the last Jedi that we had executed on Coruscant. Like there are more, but this was the last Jedi that was murdered for some reason on the planet. But that
so it's not to suggest that that leaves more questions.
Yes, because it leaves us questioning, okay, does the government kill Jedi? Like, the Jedi do seem to exist, but did they murder them beforehand? Because it says execution. I have to double check if it also says, like, you know, execution and not just murder. If he was just murdered on Coruscant, that would be one thing, because that's vague. But execution
lots of Jedi are killed, so...
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But execution implies the government, you know, got rid of him.
That's very interesting. One part of that's interesting to me is I assume that when it said the Last Jedi, Erebuskin, it inferred he's the last of the Jedi Order. But you're saying that it's just the last one of several who was executed.
Yeah, that's a possibility, because the book doesn't really go into detail, which is frustrating.
That leaves me with more questions, because first of all, that implies that there was more executed first.
Mm-hmm.
That implies he's the last of those executed. So also, that implies, why did they stop? Why was there this period of time where they were executing Jedi, and then it seems like they've stopped afterwards?
But now we know there was a Jedi Knight, and there is still an Order, because one Knight took the historian Helzig and his crew to Leia's grave, which is not open for the public. So what we could headcanon based on this information is there was something between the government and the Jedi Order. And the government started executing Jedi. And then apparently, we can guess the government took control over the Order, or like knocked them down, you know, to follow what they wanted the Jedi Order to do or something. And now the Order does exist, but it's like weakened in a way, because
it's almost...
And they are suppressed in a way.
It's like the government's persecuting the Jedi Order, almost like a religion would be persecuted.
Yeah, and it's like, okay, like when they say Leia's grave isn't open to the public, that could also tie into that, where it's like, we're not they don't want to celebrate the birthday.
And they don't want people to celebrate Leia or visit her grave. They want to suppress the religion of the Jedi Order.
Yeah, that's probably based on context what we could make out of this.
That's super interesting. These are really cool. Cool. I really hope that the folks who are working on the Hungarian translation will work on these.
Yeah, I think these are even more obscure. Yeah, because I'm pretty sure I'm literally the only person who talked about them.
Yeah, they're really cool. So thanks for coming to talk with me about it. Is there anything else that we should know about these?
I don't think so. But yeah, this was very nice. You know, looking over the stuff, especially the Obi-Wan chapter and like chapter 1 that talks about Luke, and you know, this little philosophical breakdown. That was very nice. Yeah,
Oliver clearly put a lot of thought into it. And he wasn't just doing it to... We can see very clearly he wasn't just like, oh, I'll just summarize the movies. He was a fan who was like, all right, I have a chance. I'm going to leave my mark on the universe.
Yeah, that's why I don't want to call these cash grabs, because you can tell, he had some ideas, and I wish he would have fleshed them out even more, because like the implications and stuff that he sets up for this future is very interesting.
Very interesting indeed. I wish
and like
he'd elaborated.
And like I showed in my chronology, it works in order with like the Jedi Outlaw story as well.
Yeah. which was the scrap video game storyline.
Exactly.
Yeah. And wasn't Outcast, then they switched to do Battle of the Sith Lords, and then that got scrapped too? Or what did they do instead of Outlaw?
Instead
Force
of
Unleashed,
Outlaw,
they did-
yeah, Force Unleashed.
Force Unleashed, yeah.
Mhm.
Gotcha. Okay. Interesting. They try to make 2 games in the Legacy era, and neither of them saw fruition ultimately.
Yeah. 3, technically. We were going to get episode 7, Shadows of the Sith, in the early 2000s.
Yeah. Yeah. Very interesting. It would have been nice to get that because we didn't really get lots of video games post Return of the Jedi, with the exception of the Dark Forces games. So, but have you tried to contact the author of these or track him down beyond his photo? Because it would be very interesting to talk to him and ask him what his ideas are for this, and to elaborate on what he was thinking about this era. You know.
Oh, I would have to. That would be difficult. I would have to go full stalker mode. I don't even know if the guy is still alive. Like, I could literally find very little information of him, you know. But maybe it's worth it. Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe I should try.
How old was he when he was in Phantom Menace? Would you guess?
I don't know, but he looks about like a man in his 40s.
Okay. Which is 20 years ago, so he'd be 60s now, maybe.
Could still be alive.
70s,
Let's hope. Like, if there's a way, like, it would be nice if he's still like the head of like the Star Wars fan club or whatever. It would be easier to find contact information, but yeah.
Do you know if that German Star Wars fan club still exists? Because if so, they'd probably know who their past chairman was, you would think.
I don't know. I haven't looked into it, but that's worth it. Yeah, I should try it.
Yes. And I mean, it would be kind of fun if he had written down somewhere further elaborations that he hadn't put in that he could show us. Because I feel like as an aspiring writer myself, the idea of vaguely hinting at parts of an era and not having further ideas, you can't not have further ideas. Because with these vague establishments, he clearly has an idea for that universe, for that era.
Yeah.
He clearly had his thoughts for it, and he only vaguely hinted at them. I want to know the full picture, the full story. It's very interesting. And I had one more question. For you, would you consider them within expanding universe continuity?
Absolutely, I would.
Absolutely. Okay. Yeah.
And I mean, these are good ones, because unlike, let's say if it was like full novels, which were presented as like actual facts in history, but then they had like big contradictions. Like the other Hungarian Han Solo, not Han Solo book, the Hungarian Thrawn trilogy book, Power of the Jedi.
The sequel to Heir to the Empire. Yeah.
Exactly. Which was written before Dark Force Rising came out. That one obviously doesn't work whatsoever. I would still be interested in reading it just because it's a curiosity. But that one you can't reconcile at all.
Yeah.
With these ones, they have an inbuilt excuse of like, they are in universe so far in the future. Of course, they may get some information wrong. Why don't they include frickin' Sal Solo? They don't know about him, or he's not important enough in, history.
Yeah.
When we talk about Han Solo's,
the records about him are lost to time. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. This has me thinking about so many things. Like, I just love these. They're great. I'm definitely going to try to track these down and get them for my personal collection because they're terrific. I had a chance to get them once for like £9 in the UK, but I passed on it because I was still like, what are they? And I still didn't really know what they were. So that was a mistake, but hopefully I'll find them at some point in the future. With these stories that are hinted at here, and with this so far in the future, it's very interesting that he was already looking beyond like what was going on at the time to a completely different universe. And it's still within the Star Wars universe, but he had an idea for something. And I wonder if he knew that he had to keep it vague because he wondered if the books would eventually perhaps contradict what he would do. So he kept it vague on purpose. You think that could have been
possibility,
as well?
I would think. But again, it's 1,000 years in the future. Maybe he thought like, oh, if I'm going to set it that far, like they're probably not going to catch up, because the Bantam era was like covering literally year after year in universe. So that would have taken them a long time to catch up 2,000 years later.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks for coming on to discuss this with me. I appreciate it, and to show off your copies and to look at the material and answer questions. It was very fun. I appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure.
So, with that said, hope people watching enjoyed, and was glad to talk about these. They're really cool. The Heyne-Minis, 4 German Star Wars ambiguously or perhaps completely EU stories. So, yeah, those were really cool.